back during the Reagan administration when George Herbert Walker Bush was primarily in charge, and Colonel Oliver North was deeply involved in the Iran-Contra scandal, as it came to be known. North issued some plans for the military takeover of the United States for martial law. And among the things that they said they would activate martial law against were, one would be a nuclear war, which is somewhat understandable, but also widespread dissent of a U.S. invasion abroad. So according to plans that were laid back in the 80s, if enough people said they're against the war, then they could declare martial law.
There has been a lot of stuff that's been laid down in the backgrounds of the recent laws that gives the Secretary of Health and Human Services an appointed official, not an elected official that has any accountability to the general public, really control over what is used in terms of a vaccine or drugs, who is going to be rounded up and quarantined, and who is going to be examined that they might be infectious.
Back in the 1980s, during the Reagan administration, there was a project called Rex 84 that was released. And in this project, or this plan, they called for all the bases that were being closed down from the budget cuts, the military budget cuts. These bases closed down. However, when you go back to some of these bases today and take a look at them, there's a very interesting thing that's occurred. The military bases used to have fences with barbed wire that faced out to keep people from the outside from getting into a secure area. Now a lot of these bases that have been closed down has the barbed wire facing in, as if to keep people from the inside from getting out. Now why would this occur? Is it possible that there is or was a long-term plan that would eventually anticipate rounding up large numbers of people to withhold them? Now, we apply this into a scenario today. We know that we've got these terrible terrorists all over the world that want to do us harm. And we know that there's the threat of chemical and biological attack. In the event that there was a biological attack, or maybe an outbreak of a virus or a flu, and the powers that be had a plan for mandatory vaccinations for everybody, undoubtedly there would be a lot of people, myself included, that would refuse to take a mandatory vaccine. Is it possible that they've anticipated this and are going to want to round up all the people that refuse to comply and hold them in detention centers for their own good? Is it possible that this whole plan has been in place for decades?
As a result of my experience in the military, I was vaccine injured, and I've made sort of a statement that I will never take another vaccine as long as I live, nor will I ever give another vaccine. I had no idea the damages that could be caused by vaccines, the dangers involved.
There were a couple of things that George Bush made a comment about with the bird flu. One was he pushed forward the agenda to give the pharmaceutical company complete liability protection by saying incorrectly that the pharmaceutical companies need to be protected, that the reason that they aren't getting into the vaccine business is because they're being sued for their inferior products. The other thing that he talked about was the fact that this could be such a rampant pandemic that we would have to pull out the National Guard, possibly mobilize the military in order to quarantine and containment. It's actually been shown in the literature that those types of enforcement arms aren't very effective. And like I said, people who are very sick, they self-quarantine. I mean, when you've got a bad case of the flu, you're not out going to the grocery store, you're home in bed. So to be able to enforce people to do that is really heavy-handed.
Cooperation is mandatory in a communitarian society. You will do what you are told, and they have the techniques and they have the technology to invade pretty much every area of your life.
We've already talked to the police. The police departments in various countries are already getting involved of how they are going to be enrolled in the whole process of mandatory quarantine, and perhaps even things like directing traffic to the vaccinations, to the schools where the vaccines are being administered, because there'll be enough people, because they run on a basis of fear, that will stampede to the local place that's giving the vaccine, because they aren't informed and they don't understand what's in the vaccine or what the problems are that are associated with it. But the 25% that decide, or the percentage of whatever that says, I don't want to have anything to do with that, the enforcement arm could very well come through the national ID